Now, greetings to all. This is Truth is Out, and I have a very important guest with me called Katherine Horton. She is the creator of the website Stop007 and the website of Joint Investigation Team, revealing the prosecution and harassment, also known as gun stalking, of innocent civilians all around the world. These victims are called target individuals by the shadow government, and they are targeted for exposing serious crimes against humanity. She is a physicist that has worked in CERN and has been an expert witness in many court procedures of these victims, and she is also an expert in energy direct weapons. Hi, Catherine.
Hello, very pleased to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and the background you have and the experience as a target individual, please?
Yes, so I ended up doing this not really by choice, but I was forced to do it because I started being gang stalked while I was at the University of Oxford. And it actually started the very first week when I became an undergraduate for my physics studies. That was a long, long time ago. And then I was stalked on and off, but it was back then I thought, oh, that is just a group of, perverted old men who were stalking me around. And it wasn't as intensive as gang stalking is for most victims. So for many, many years, I just ignored it. And then it kind of, ebbed away. But then when I was actually teaching at Oxford, so I was there for my physics university degree. I also did my PhD there. And eventually I became one of the fellows. And I was a research fellow at St. John's College, Oxford. And that is when I started being gang stalked at very high intensity. And it actually started, I changed from my field, particle physics, to the study of complex human systems. And I was analyzing the British court as my first case study.
Can you repeat,
Yeah,
please?
sure. So I originally, I was a particle physicist. So that's when I worked at CERN and at DAISY. But then towards the end of my fellowship, I changed fields to a new field, which is the study of complex systems. And what interested me was the physics of complex human systems. So that is, for example, court systems, currency systems, anything that is, created by humans and is very complex. So my first case study was actually the English court system. And I went to a very public, very big court case as an independent observer. And pretty much from the first week of attending this court case, MI5 started following me home. And they had a man, always a different man, but always a man waiting outside my drive every morning who would follow me all the way to the train station. And then, eventually I realized, oh, they're following me on the train. And then they follow me into the courthouse. And bit by bit, as this court case was running over several weeks, I learned how they were doing the stalking and how they followed me all the way from my house door to the court and back home. And what was interesting is that after this court case, the stalking never stopped. It hasn't stopped to this day. So even then I thought, okay, this is just something that will pass. Maybe it's just, I don't know, MI5 think I'm strange or I'm a terrorist or they just want to look at me. Okay, fine. And I ignored it. But then I started being stalked by one of the lawyers of the court case who appeared in Oxford himself, even though he lives in London. And then when I left the UK at the end of my fellowship, the stalking followed me to Germany and eventually to Switzerland. And it is very, very intensive. But with time, what happened to me is that it wasn't just stalking. Suddenly, the gang stalkers would repeat private sentences that I said to my husband in our home. And it would just get ever more kind of, there would be an increase in the intensity and how shocking the crimes were that these people were committing. And in the end, it was followed by hacking, intrusive surveillance, echoing of what I did inside. Then in Germany, I wanted to start a business and they were following me to business meetings. Then I realized that they were placing fake people who pretended to be interested in my business in my path, and they would always try to derail me. So that went on for the year and a half when I was intensely trying to launch my business. And in the end, it led to the destruction of my startup. So I just had to pull out. So at that point, we moved to Switzerland because my husband had a job here. And then the stalking followed us here to Switzerland. But then what happened, and this is now where I am today, is that as part of the stalking, I always used to have regular housebreaking. So people used to come into our homes and never really steal anything of value, but sometimes rearrange things or take small things away. And so that I couldn't find it anywhere in the house, and then bring it back and put something into the most unlikely places, you know. And it was pretty clear that, oh, this is the method that the Stasi used. It's called Zersetzung. So I thought by that time, okay, I've seen the human surveillance network of MI5 and here in Germany now. I know that the Germans are using this Stasi method, as was MI5, fine. But then when it followed us to Switzerland, I already started having enough. And after Christmas in 2016, we came home early January 2016 and from my parents. And when my husband and I arrived at home, I realized they had again broken into the house, and they had placed a piece of jewelry on our bathroom, windowsill. So it was again so weird, but I knew that the jewelry wasn't mine. It certainly wasn't my husband's. He didn't have any women around the house because I was at home all the time, so that was impossible. So it was again the gang stalkers. And I got so angry. I said to my husband, look, tomorrow I'm going to go to the police and I'm going to report everything. The entire stalking in the UK, in Germany, and in here in Switzerland. And then he said, yeah, okay, do it. And then we went to bed. And when we went to bed, that was the very first time I was overtly attacked with a directed energy weapon. I literally, we lay down in bed and they started burning my legs. And it was clear that there was a beam because holding my hand, I could feel the beam in the room. It was very painful. It was burning my hand. So that was the moment when I realized, oh, I'm dealing with a really big criminal network here, and they are out to damage my life. So what happened? So this is how I got to today. I went, so I started researching this criminality. I went and attended a court case in Britain called Philip Kerr versus MI5. And there I met a businessman called Philip Kerr. And during the court case, I realized that the crimes committed against this businessman were identical to what I had suffered all these years. So after that, I spoke to Philip Kerr. I got to know even more. And then a couple of months later, I sued British intelligence as well. So back then, I don't think British intelligence assumed somebody would go and take them to court just like that. So when they realized, oh, I'm serious, I received a death threat on the way to the court. And 3 days after the very first hearing, I survived an assassination attempt on the motorway in Switzerland. So by
How
that
was
time,
how was the death threat exactly? What
so
did they
the death
do?
threat is, it's everything they do is always, it goes with something they call plausible deniability. So they try to be subtle all the way to the point when they really hit you, when it's not subtle at all. So in that case, imagine I was flying to London in the evening, and I arrived at something like 11:30 p.m. in the London airport. And then I went outside and I took the only bus that was available at time, which was an easy bus, so the EasyJet bus into London. And got onto this bus. At first, I was the only person, and then suddenly a guy came on, and the guy, sat down right next to me, even though the bus was empty. And after him, a young black lady came, and she got on. She got onto the seat behind us, and throughout the entire journey, she was holding her mobile phone like this to the back of my head, you know. So I was like thinking that that's a bit odd. At the time, I didn't know that I've got chips on the back of my head. That's another story. But as I just started, this guy started talking to me, and we started making small talk. And eventually he said, Catherine, there's crime in every country, but in some countries it's very well hidden. I said, yeah, really? Okay. And then he just looked at me. He realized she doesn't get it. So then he said the same sentence again, looking at me intently. And I already thought, okay, this is a bit strange. And then he had a pause, and then he said, did they kill Diana? And that was it, right? He just stared at me and said, did they kill Diana? And the story behind the death of Princess Diana is that it's suspected that she was murdered by MI6. Okay.
Yes, it's
So
very well known.
yeah, exactly. So then imagine this is kind of like you have this odd conversation, and in the conversation, these references to organized crime and the death of Diana made no sense. It just came out of nowhere. So I was like, okay, fine. So we drove into London, and at the time I wasn't even bothered. I just thought, oh, another weirdo, fine. And then what happened is that I went into the court case, and then when I came back from the court case, I went to the hotel, and in the hotel I was shot at with directed energy weapons so hard that I collapsed from pain. And then, they waited until my husband came home, and when I got up from the bed to just tell him what happened, they shot at me again so that I collapsed in front of him. So that was kind of like already a warning shot. But then we went back to Switzerland after this. And, 3 days later, it was the weekend. And my husband said, look, let's just go somewhere, go for a hike in the mountains. So we went for a hike. And in the evening, we were driving our car back home. And we were on the motorway just outside Lucerne. And when you're driving on the motorway in Switzerland, you have these motorway tunnels. So you're literally driving through, mountains, and these tunnels are cut through. So you're driving very fast at 100 kilometers per hour, and then eventually you're in a tunnel. And it was in one of these tunnels that there was two cars, just two normal cars, one ahead and one, behind us. And as we were driving at this speed, suddenly I felt being shot at by a directed energy weapon. But they have waveforms. When they hit you in the head, it is literally like being hit on the head with a hammer. So you feel these very weird shots, and it also kind of goes into your brain. So you get like your brain gets like almost like an electroshock, like a flash. And I felt these, and I felt, oh my God, if I get another shot, I will literally pass out, and I will, with 100 kilometers per hour, drive next to the wall, drive into the wall. So at the time, what was lucky is that I thought, oh, I have to get out of the beamline. And instead of slowing down, which would have made them finish me off, I just pulled out into the acceleration lane and drove straight at them. So I kind of overtook them, but I was driving towards the weapon. And I don't think they expected that I would do that. And this is how we got out. And then I said to my husband, they just shot at me with a directed energy weapon. And of course, what is so bad about both the gang stalking and this covert housebreaking and the directed energy weapons is that to a certain extent it is invisible. So most
Yes.
victims struggle with collecting evidence, and then
Yeah, it's invisible. It's invisible and also it's unknown for most of the population. So it's very difficult to prove that you have a microwave targeting you.
absolutely, yeah.
Mm. You know, when I was in the university studying history, I made an essay about wounds in soldiers in the Iraq War. And so I found out about the energy direct weapons in that essay. And most people in my class, they were totally shocked because they didn't know this exists. But I have like the quotes of generals and soldiers and people talking about this. And you have the active denial system. Do you know this? You have the active denial system in Wikipedia. So, I mean, it's very well known if you just study a little bit about it. But well, please continue with your
Well,
with your story.
the reference to Iraq is a good one, because in Iraq they trialed all sorts of weapons, exotic weapons. So the directed energy weapons are actually very old technology. I mean, it was around in the 1950s, and even before that. But when what they did in Iraq with the active denial system. So for those people who don't know, the active denial system, which is a very creepy name in itself, is a big microwave dish. So imagine you take almost like a satellite dish, and you're focusing the energy of your microwave at a person. And we all know that if you put, for example, a sausage or meat into the microwave, you can make it explode, you can make it burn just with your normal $20 microwave or €20 microwave. And when you focusing this energy, you can cause such horrific injuries. It's just out of this world. So I remember that there was one bus being attacked. And what happened is that this directed energy weapon just, microwaves go through glass. They even go through
Yeah, they cut the bus in half, isn't it? Because I found that you mean in Iraq war. You mean in the Iraq war? Yeah, I found out about the energy direct weapon just because of that bus, and also strange wounds in soldiers. Like for example, they were burned alive, but their clothes was totally fine, and it's like how is possible? And I found out about this bus because I found a doctor's testimony, an Iraqi doctor, and he was talking that it might be a laser because it was cut in half.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people were decapitated. So everything above the metal of the car, because metal reflects microwaves, basically everything that was above was just burnt off, but just gone. So you had essentially decapitated corpses that were fine at the bottom. There's also injuries where, limbs are missing, but they are charcoaled, and you can see that the flesh is completely black and burnt, and the bone is just sticking out. I mean, it's so horrific. War is horrific anyway, but what makes these directed energy weapons so even deadlier is that you can't even flee behind the walls of a house. There's no way to shield yourself because brick and concrete allow the microwaves to pass through at 50% intensity. So if the active denial system doubles the intensity, where you just, they turn up the power just on your microwave, the people are defenseless in their homes. They are burnt alive in their homes. So that was deadly. But also another weapon was tried in Iraq, which is the voice of God weapon, whereby they beamed messages into the heads of these soldiers. And there's different ways to do that. If you've got a direct line of sight, you can use something that's called the Fry effect, and then you can literally hear microwaves because they start interfacing with your hearing system. But there's also other ways to use the voice of God weapon. But the end effect is that you hear a perfect audio transmission in your head as if you had headphones in, but you don't have headphones in. So these Iraqi soldiers felt or thought that God is speaking to them, and instead it was just the bloody US military having basically a joke. Okay. And there was also other reports about trained soldiers suddenly just soiling themselves. Well, we know that these energy weapons, when they're aimed at your digestive system, they can basically make your bowels relax. They can just empty your bowels. So in a sense, you can when you aim a weapon like that at a person, you can force defecate them. So and that, when you analyze it, it's not normal for trained soldiers to just soil themselves like that, but it is absolutely normal when you understand this crime cartel for them and these totally mentally ill soldiers, for them always trying to humiliate their victims. So, maiming and murdering for them is not enough. They also want to
Sorry, we're having problems here. Can you please repeat the last sentence because it was yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I can understand why they sabotage the last sentence, because what I said is that it is not common, okay, for trained soldiers to just like soil themselves, okay, just in large numbers, okay. But it is, when you understand this crime cartel, it is absolutely standard that they always try to humiliate their victims. It is not enough for them to just maim and murder the victims. They want to humiliate, sexually denigrate, and it's a bit like what we saw in Abu Ghraib, in this prison, which to me, frankly, looks like a porn factory, like sadistic porn factory, where they attached electrodes to, the testicles of the prisoners and stuff like that. I mean, this is not national defense. This is not what war is about and what soldiers should do. This is a bunch of mentally ill people living out their sexual perversions, you know, and we see.
Well, I mean, in every war there are many crimes. Of course, sexual crimes are very common, but the problem here is also they experiment with their own soldiers.
Absolutely.
It is not that they just experiment with the enemy, which will be, I mean, kind of like normal in a situation of war. If not that they also experiment in their own soldiers. It's the first people they experiment. And I don't know if you have watched gang stalking, ex-gang stalking testimony, gang stalker testimony that says that they were experimenting with a building of the NSA and their families also.
Yeah,
That's a
absolutely.
whole building. So, I mean, that's very, very. And can you please talk also a little bit about the energy direct weapons now that we are talking about them and the different kinds of weapons you can find? Because there are many different types of energy direct weapons.
Yes. So the first thing about the directed energy weapons is, I mean, there's different size of weapons. So they range from, I mean, if you think about how small can you make a weapon based on just your personal microwave? If you take your microwave, if you open your microwave, which I don't recommend you do, but if you did, and you strip away the cavity, the big, box where you put your food, and you just look at the electronics, the actual device that generates the microwaves, it's so small it fits into your hand, okay? And that is just what you take out of a standard 20 euro microwave. Now, you can take that and you can generate microwaves and then use metal, like a metal funnel, to reflect them somewhere. And then depending on how big you make this, you can have a microwave weapon that in principle can fit into, well, a thick mobile phone even, like a little box. It can fit into a handbag. It can fit into a rucksack, okay? So, and even that would be enough to give somebody cancer, to potentially damage their heart forever, give them brain damage, give them a stroke, everything. But then you can also go bigger. If you have more space, you can have a really powerful directed energy weapon, for example, hidden in a car. And that actually exists. There's an advert from the German arms manufacturers Diehl and Rheinmetall, who were advertising, I think already back in 2011, an actual direct advert for a directed energy weapon you can put into the back of the car. Now, that weapon is always advertised as, something you can stop a car with, because you would, fire a pulse and it would take out the electronics. But with exactly the same weapon, you can fire at the head of the driver and you will take out his electronics, meaning the human brain, So you can murder somebody just by driving in front of them, firing the weapon into their head. That would cause an accident. They most likely die if it happens at high speed. And it would be physically impossible to prove that it was you. So when you have a directed energy weapon like that, that is, I mean, the perfect murder weapon. And for this reason, these directed energy weapons are now proliferating everywhere. So there is when people can find this online, there's a global market analysis for directed energy weapons, and the market share back in 2017 or 2016 was 8 billion, but it's going to expand to 42 billion over the next couple of years, just until 2023 or something like that. So it means that a market which is already huge is now going to increase by 500%. And what that means is that we have a boom of these directed energy weapons, and they will range typically from the big machines that also you could, for example, you have, I think Lockheed Martin is advertising a laser with which you can, from the ground, shoot down a missile. Okay.
Yeah.
Now that's a pretty big laser. I mean, it's like a big, big device, but this is not where most of this market share goes into, you know. I mean, of course, you can put these type of directed energy weapons there. There's the active denial system that goes on tanks, you know, a big dish. And for example, with the big dish, people, they make it sound like, oh, look, you aim it at a crowd of people for crowd control, and then
Yes.
they induce the sensation of burning, but they don't really burn the skin. And then they show trained soldiers who basically can only stand this for less than a second, and then they just jump out of the beam. Well, at a low setting, that might be the case. But when you turn up the very same dish, and all you have to do is turn a dial, then you will literally exterminate a large group of people. You will burn them alive. Now, you know, when you're dealing with that type of directed energy weapon, the question is, do we really want to have our police to have one of these weapons of mass destruction?
Please, Catherine, can you please repeat the last sentence? Because again, it was like we have problems.
Okay, sure. So this is again very topical why they would sabotage it, because right now the active denial system, the big microwave dish, is being put on police cars. So the police is buying these tanks with these, you know, microwave dishes, and they are selling it just as like, oh, it just, you know, when you step into the beam, it will give you the sensation of burning, and it will not actually burn you. You will just have this intense sensation on your skin. But as soon as, you know, the person who's controlling the dish turns up the power, just like you can turn up the power on your microwave, you know, this dish can burn alive an entire large group of people. Okay. And it can also aim at a very large distance. You can aim as far as you have sight on the horizon.
Yeah, because what it says, the active denial system is for non-governmental purpose. So, I mean, it means everybody can buy these weapons,
Yeah,
basically. And they say they shoot at you just like for a few seconds. But if you, I mean, if you shoot someone with that, like for 1 minute, what can happen, because yeah, it's very dangerous. And can you speak, now that we are talking about the energy diet weapons, about the 5G? What do you know about 5G? And if it's because Kerry Cassidy had an interview with a former British agent, and he said it's a weapon.
yeah.
And actually, they want to use the energy diet weapons through the 5G system to target any individual, basically.
That is correct. So 5G is an integrated weapon system. That is its first function, and that is exactly its design specification. Everything about the 5G system is aimed towards it acting as a weapon system. And then on top of that, what it can also do as an afterthought is, you know, telecommunication. So it means 5G is a weapon of mass destruction through which you also happen to be able to stream cute kitten videos over YouTube. Okay, but it's you know, the main function of it is a mass extermination weapon and a way to hold an entire nation hostage. Okay, and literally threaten them with their lives. Now, the way it works, and the crucial difference between 5G and 3 and 4G is the waveform. So whereas you have in 3 and 4G a microwave emitter that is emitting kind of, you know, spherical waves, or, you know, when it's focused, you know, kind of almost concentric waves. What that means is that, first of all, the intensity drops off with the distance. Okay. But also it means that you can't really target it. So everybody in that neighborhood gets the same signal. And this is why you can use your phone over there and you can use it over there. You know, the signal is everywhere. But with the 5G, they are shooting pulses. And the idea is to shoot a targeted pulse at a particular device. So if you hold this device to your head, the pulse will hit your phone and your head. If anybody walks through between the 5G antenna and your, communication, your phone call, they'll be shot in the head. So it is pulsed shots. But of course, if you want to use it as a weapon, what you can do is identify certain people as they're walking down the street and keep shooting them in the head until they collapse and have a stroke in the street, or they have a heart attack. So in other words, the best way to think about 5G is it is really the electromagnetic equivalent of a city or a country putting up machine guns on the rooftops everywhere, a machine gun every 50 meters. And as you're walking, the machine gun is following you. And somebody can just say, I don't like this person, and shoot you in the head. And you would just collapse dead then and there. That is 5G. Now, do we really want that as a society? And also, as these 5G pulses are traveling, anything that is small in biomass, like birds, insects, or babies and young children, will get a full dose, and the entire nervous system will get a pulse basically put through. So the first thing I would expect to happen with the 5G system is that very small animals with small skulls, like birds, would die. And that's exactly what happened. Wherever they put up the 5G, people would come out the next day and find a bunch of dead birds on the floor. These birds were shot out of the sky by the system.
It happened in many places already.
Yeah. And the same thing can happen to your newborn child. Do we want that? So it is actually 5G is best described as a weapon of mass destruction. That's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, there are many testimonies saying that, and that if you are in a blacklist, they can target you anywhere you go. I mean,
yeah,
basically.
Yeah, exactly.
And also, I wanted to ask you about Trump. What do you think about him? Do you really believe he's with the white hats and the Q? And what do you believe? What do you think about the Q movement?
Right. Well, the Q movement itself, it seems to be a psyop. Okay. But just because it's a psyop, it doesn't mean that there is nothing behind that. Okay. Because you can have psyops for all sorts of reasons. You can have psyops to wake people the hell up, okay? But of course, the entire Q thing is very contrived. I think with Q particularly, people have to be careful that it is good as long as it stays on target, aimed at informing people about the criminality, gets them to think about it, but it's always with the view of arrests and jailing, then it's good. And Q has done a lot of good work. I mean, the whole Q phenomenon of getting people to wake up. What is dangerous, though, is that it does it with this mystique, okay? And with this kind of like, code and secrecy is cool. It's so cool. No, it's not cool. It is actually highly criminal, So, I don't like this fetishization of breaking codes and solving puzzles, because it's exciting, and but particularly men can get very excited about that, but it's also the very mechanism of the crime cartel that got us where we are now. Okay, so I think Q is great as long as it's not too cryptic, and as long as it actually aims to get everybody on board, even single moms or people who are working and don't have much time to solve puzzles. I mean, what the hell is that about, right? Why should they put in weekends just to decipher cryptic messages? We don't need that. Now, with that said, right, and with Trump, you have to be very careful and very, very, I think, analytical about the whole thing. Because fact of the matter is, Trump is absolutely right. The Clintons are criminals. The Clintons have a body count like Arnold Schwarzenegger in one of his films, okay? So they are literally mobsters who are killing people for a living. And they are perpetrating, and not them themselves. They don't have to hold the gun. They've got people to do it for them. But the entire crime cartel that the Clintons are part of, they are a crime family. that is deadly. And they are interfacing with even worse, terrorist finances, as in our banks, right? And with other crime families all across the world. And their goal was literally the ultimate destruction of America. And Obama did a very, very good job. Okay, because for example, it was under Obama that we had they had the bioethics committee, which was a cover-up of Americans being tortured to death with directed energy weapons and with neurotechnology. Now, the Clintons are exactly the same crime cartel as the Obamas. But in this election, really, Trump was the only choice. Now, of course, Trump himself is a billionaire, and I for sure know as a systems analyst, you don't get to become a billionaire and even less stay a billionaire unless you're down with the cartel one way or another. Okay. And then when you look at Trump Towers, it has Masonic cartel signaling everywhere. He has like a triangle of trees, 6 by 6 by 6. His penthouse, I believe, is on the 66th floor after he left out 13 floors, as in the 13 bloodlines. So these are all Masonic numbers. And of course, Trump has to be a Mason. Otherwise, he wouldn't have got to where he is. He also, I think, did the Masonic handshake with the Queen of England, who's another head Mason, So, okay. So that said, what we can tell, though, is that Trump has said a lot of things that nobody has ever said before, and he just put it out there. For example, the fake news and the fake news media. And with that, he doesn't mean, the alternative news media. He's talking about the mainstream media. For a US president to come out and actually unmask the entire media conglomerate as fake news is big. And it's
Yeah,
particularly big.
and also, it's a way of targeting the Council of Foreign Relations, for example,
Absolutely. Yeah,
because they
exactly.
are all in that group, in the Bilderberg, in the Council of Foreign Relations. No, I mean,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Now, the thing is where you have to be careful at some point, okay, is that on some level, Trump has to be a member of the cartel. Otherwise, he's not.
he
He
wouldn't
wouldn't
be
be going.
there.
Okay, so the question is now, at what level is he? And the American people should be aware that Trump's presidency also has been announced. Okay, so you've got the staircase scene in The Simpsons, but you also have this Woody Allen film called Whatever Works, where Trump is listed in a series of presidents, in a wax museum. And he literally appears after George Bush, so in the Republican line. So, it's not a surprise. Trump too was groomed, was prepared, and put into pole position for us to pick him, or for the US military to pick him. Now, with regarding the US military, I don't really believe for a second that these guys were recaptured in any way. They're probably good people working for them, just as much as there were good people working for the NSA. But it is the US military that is running the satellite weapon system that is shooting people around the world. Okay? So if the US military is that great and elected Trump and placed him there to recapture the country, please someone explain to me why the hell they continue shooting me, because both the head of NATO and the head of the US Space Command, right, they are US Air Force generals. So what's up with those guys? Okay.
Yeah, for example, just not the energy direct weapons, but also the chemtrails.
Yeah.
When I see the chemtrails, I think, well, what's going on? No, they supposedly the good guy. If the good guys are winning, why this genocide agenda is going on?
Absolutely, exactly. So now I think what Trump is, it is a long overdue move in the right direction. I also strongly believe that even if Trump wanted to, he couldn't go up against the cartel. But the way to turn this around and actually everything that he did that was good, for example, throwing out James Comey, big thing. Trump is openly talking about treason, and when a president openly talks about treason, knowing full well that it comes with a death penalty, now that's when we're talking. And, so he did give press conferences where he was asked of, who are the traitors? And he named all these people involved in the intel agencies. And that is unprecedented. That's absolutely unprecedented. So I think what the American people and the people of the world should do is take these very good and very important right steps that, frankly, Hillary Clinton would have never done, right? Ever. And take that and say, okay, well, Trump probably has prior ties and commitments and contracts with these people, but these people at some point will also understand that we can't continue this way. Okay. And every inch that he moves in the right direction, there has to be a huge tsunami wave of Americans and people of the world pushing him along that direction, you know? And frankly, even as a president, that is the only thing you can do, because they can kill a US president. I mean, like they killed Kennedy, right? It's not too big an effort for them. They can kill him, and then they will say, oh, he had a heart attack. He was kind of like, he wasn't the youngest. Boom, he would be dead, you know? So that's what he's playing with also. And in summary, that is my view on him. The final thought I would like to put to your viewers is that when I analyze the crime cartel, I, have several reasons to conclude, and these reasons come from, the dynamics of the system, from the money and finance required that they have to steal, and from their cartel signaling, that this crime cartel wants to asset strip the European royal families, okay, because they are the biggest landowners, because they are, the biggest and the richest, group. And the cartel wants to asset strip the billionaires. Okay, that is the goal. And the ultimate mafia hierarchy wants to cut these public faces loose, and then have replaced them by bringing up another group of equally ruthless criminals, but they are kind of no names. So those people will be really pleased to be promoted. There'll be lots of money freed up when, if people do away with the Queen of England and get all her stuff, that is a lot of money and a lot of land that gets, released. The same with all the other royal families. And I genuinely believe that this is what the cartel wants. The long-term plan is to asset strip the billionaires in the US and the old royal families in Europe. So in other words, what we're standing before, and that's the plan, is for the, Belgian and the English and the Spanish royal household to go the way of the Romanovs, and this is the moment when every royal family has a choice. They can go along with this bullshit, they can continue with the human sacrifice and the shit, or they could realize, hang on a second, at the end of the day, we had the biggest pot of money, and it seems like the cartel is after a lot of money. So we are the first in the front line, And I predict now that this is Trump could be the US billionaires understanding this, and they start flipping out of the system. And it would also explain why they are now going against the Vatican, and why the Vatican is being ejected from the UN. That is like, people switching sides because they have to.
And another question I wanted to ask you is like, which are the agencies behind the targeting? Just if you name a few and the most important.
Yes. So in every single country, the domestic intelligence service is involved, and they run the human intelligence. So they run the network of snitches and stalkers, that they are all involved. Also, in every country, the digital surveillance agencies are involved. And so in the UK, that would be GCHQ. In the US, that would be NSA. Now, I'm not sure what they are called in Spain, but every country has also digital surveillance agency, which is like a mini NSA, They are also involved, in what they do is they coordinate the communication between the gang stalkers, and they also coordinate the communication with the microchip implant body area networks that all the victims have and all the gang stalkers have. So many people don't know, and we haven't talked about it, that they get implanted I mean, typically the strong emitter that communicates with Wi-Fi and the mobile phone network is in the back of the head or on the neck, in my experience. And, you know, what we have is all the gang stalkers and everybody else is, you know, being pulled into a big data analysis system. So their position is not just monitored from mobile phones, but also from their body chips, and their heartbeat is monitored. So there's a lot of data coming in. And this data is being run by the digital surveillance agencies. It is also being run by the telecommunication, private telecommunication companies, okay, because they have to, you know, the signals travel through their architecture. But it's also run by big private military contractors like Lockheed Martin in the US. So Lockheed Martin is running the gang stalking in at least 47 out of the 50 US states, according to my former colleague, Karen Melton-Stewart. And so we have these big corporations in Europe.
Karen was a secret agent, just to let the
Sorry. Yes. So yeah, well, Karen, she wasn't a secret agent as such. She was an intelligence analyst. I mean, the difference, as I understand it, is that she was doing translation work for NSA and stuff like that, and intelligence analysis. I don't think she was, you know, out in the field in Iraq and being an agent like that. So yes, she was an intelligence analyst. And Karen Melton-Stewart, left NSA when she came across huge corruption, and she complained about it internally, and actually didn't even realize that she had chanced upon the big criminality, right? The big gang of criminals inside NSA. So she was kind of, you know, retired out of the agency, and she became a target. So she started being assaulted with directed energy weapons and things like that. And sorry, just to finish the because you asked me which country, so which agencies are involved. So it's those intelligence agencies. Then the other thing that's involved is that all the so-called anti-terror units and anti-terror networks, the anti-terror warning systems, they are partially also run by police services. So that's when domestic intelligence interfaces with the police. The other thing that's certainly involved is if your country has any sort of community policing, like the UK has. The community policing is the gang stalkers. They are involved, and most, the chiefs of the police stations are involved as well. You know, it's these people.
Okay, that's a very good way to expose it. Yes, I have another question. What do you think about the 100,000 indictments? Do you believe they are real? Do you believe they are being implemented already with the Comey and all these people and Mueller being, being targeted and removed from their positions? What do you believe?
Well, I hope so. So the truth is, if somebody went through the NSA databases, because all the gang stalking, all the criminals, their identity and what they have done, we already have the data. The data is being held by NSA, okay? The data is being held by the telecommunication companies, and the data is also being held by the banks, because all these people get paid for what they do. Okay. So there are at least three very big data warehouses where you could find all these criminals. If somebody went through these data warehouses and, graphed and mapped the data properly, you would probably end up with at least 100,000 indictments, and you could generate them very swiftly. Because once you get the pattern, you could get, entire networks of gang stalkers, you could get their handlers, you could get the people who are wielding directed energy weapons, everything. So if the white hats would get going and would work like they should, you would expect that many indictments. Now, there is still a big gap between investigators and even the police, when the police does it themselves, filing indictments, and the people being taken to court. Okay, so that's what a gap is, because the judiciary system can receive these indictments and not do anything. The judiciary system can also receive these indictments, intend to do something, but then work so slowly that we will never ever work off these 100,000, you know? So I don't know. I will believe that this is real and this is actually leading somewhere when the 100,000 indictments start being processed by the judiciary, and I think they should be processed now. Okay, if they don't start to be processed, I mean, why did people have to wait until 100,000 accumulate? Why not start processing them after the first
Yeah,
10,000?
they are saying they are waiting until the 2020, the election, the re-election of Trump.
I mean, why would you want to wait?